the dishonesty of the West, part of the dishonesty in the West that's encoded into the cultural DNA of the West, Western so-called civilization. It's part of their dishonesty for them to say, for example, the problem is capitalism. You know, this is part of the allowable discourse to say something like this. This is the part of the controlled discourse. You can say capitalism has ruined everything. The problem is capitalism. Capitalism is evil. The capitalist system is evil. So then you have, you know, after that, you have whatever else there is, you know, Marxism, socialism, communism, blah, blah, blah. It's the system. So let's change the system. This is how they address the problems in their society. Let's change the system. No, the system didn't make you like this. You understand? You made the system this way because you are like this. And you're going to do the same thing to any other system that you come up with. The problem isn't the system. The problem is the operators of the system. And this is what you're not supposed to talk about. This is outside the accepted discourse. This is outside the parameters of accepted discourse, allowable discourse. Because of course it is. And this is really and truly criminal. It's criminal what this the so-called Western civilization has done to its people. It's like if you have diabetes, say, you have diabetes and you go to doctor after doctor after doctor, and each doctor tells you that, well, you just have a stomach flu. Or they tell you, you're just stressed. So then they give you all sorts of different types of prescriptions for those problems that never treat the real problem. And then you just get sicker. That's what's going on in the West. You're not allowed to ever get an accurate diagnosis about what's wrong with you. So if you can't get an accurate diagnosis, then you can never get proper treatment. And I understand this to some extent because the real diagnosis for the West is catastrophic. And most people can't face it. So you just go through your whole life basically in a state of chronic disease and temporary painkillers because your own society is never going to tell you the truth. They're never going to tell you the truth about what's going on. They're never going to tell you the truth about what's going on with you, what's wrong with you. But for everyone outside, we have to be very clear about what your condition is, about what your real condition is. Everybody outside needs to understand this. And this is especially true for any Muslims, particularly who live in the West. I mean, really anyone from the global South who lives in the West, but particularly for Muslims who live in the West. In fact, obviously, it's very important for every Westerner to understand, Muslim or non-Muslim. It's very important for you to understand. But frankly, I have long since concluded that they never will. And to a great degree, they literally cannot. They literally cannot understand because, again, that in and of itself is symptomatic of the condition that you have. It's symptomatic of the condition itself. But suffice it to say, you do not live in the society you think you live in. Your so-called civilization is not what you thought it was. And that's why so many of you in the West, Muslim and non-Muslim, why you feel like you're going crazy over there. Why you feel depressed, why you get depressed, why you feel isolated, you know, why you feel so strange in your society. Why, for instance, you can't understand how everyone around you can act normal while there's a genocide being committed by your country. Because you think, or you thought, that your society, your so-called civilization, you thought that it's different from what it really is. And this is what your problem is. This is where your problem lies. And this is why you have such deeply painful cognitive dissonance. Because Diddy, for example, Epstein and the rest of them, you have to understand they are not abominations in your society. They're not aberrations in your society, and that's the truth. They are not anomalies. People like that are actually embodiments of your culture. They're embodiments of your so-called civilization. They're not strange. And if those criminals actually shock and disgust you, it's only because you have been lied to, and you lied to yourself, and you believe those lies about the society that you live in and the so-called civilization that you come from. Because these people are not monsters in your society. They're not monsters in your civilization. They are representatives of your society, a society that is itself monstrous. And again, it's not monstrous because of the system. It's not monstrous because of capitalism. It's not monstrous because of corporations. And Marxism is not going to fix it. Socialism is not going to fix it. Communism is not going to fix it. Feminism is not going to fix it. Red pill is not going to fix it. Okay? Liberalism is not going to fix it. Conservatism is not going to fix it. The system that you created is not the problem. The problem is in the people who created the system. Understand? The problem is the whole cultural context, the whole so-called civilizational context in which those systems were created. The cultural context that created the people who created the systems. That's where your problem lies. The problem is the so-called civilization itself. And you have to understand that anything and everything that comes out from that so-called civilization is going to carry that same sickness. It's going to carry the same sickness, the same infection, the same disease, and that's just a fact. You like to tell yourself in the West, and Muslims also like to say this, that the corruption is some sort of a new phenomenon in the West. And I'm telling you, no, it's not new at all. Not at all. It's not because of Trump. Okay, it's not because of Biden. It's not because of the Republicans. It's not because of the Democrats. It's not because of Obama. It's not because of Hillary. It's not because of Larry Fink. It's not because of the World Economic Forum or whatever else you might think of. I mean, you can't keep telling yourself that this corruption and this wickedness in your society is the fault of anything or anyone that your society itself produced. You also can't keep telling yourself the lie that the situation is the same everywhere, that corruption exists in all societies. No, corruption exists in good societies, yes. Corruption exists in good societies, but that's completely different in the West. Because in the West, the opposite is true, meaning that some good exists in that corrupt society as opposed to some corruption existing in good societies. They're not the same. You know, it's like saying that a bucket of water that has a drop of mud in it is the same as a bucket of mud that has a drop of water in it. No, they're not the same. They're not the same at all. You know, a weed and a flower might both grow from the same soil, but that doesn't make them identical by any means. But this is what I mean about never accepting any accurate diagnosis. You're never going to accept an accurate diagnosis because you don't want to know. And to a certain extent, like I said, I don't really blame you because the diagnosis is actually quite catastrophic, because the truth of the matter is, whether you want to hear it or not, the truth of the matter is the West, so-called civilization, is a so-called civilization that worships the devil. Yes, and it always has. From prehistory right up until today, it always has. It has been immersed in a deep and abiding relationship with the Jinn. I mean, I know you've been taught to reject this whole concept about the Jinn and what have you. I know that, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Your beliefs anyway are completely incoherent. That's the truth. The only belief, in fact, the only belief that you have been rigidly trained to dismiss and to scoff at is the only belief that's true. That's the one that you've been trained to reject. Everything else is fine. You can believe in horoscopes, manifestation, extraterrestrials, ghosts, good luck, bad luck, deja vu, tarot cards, Myers-Briggs tests, eugenics, white supremacy, and democracy. You can believe in all of these sorts of delusional superstitions, fantasies, conspiracy theories, paranormal, supernatural, all sorts of oddities, fantasies. That's fine. You can believe in all of those things, except for the actual truth. That you're not allowed to believe in. You can believe in everything across the spectrum, any and all types of beliefs across the full spectrum. You know, you can believe that we're living in a simulation. You can believe in a multiverse. You can believe in timeline jumping, portals, multi-dimensional portals, all of that stuff. You can believe in all of that. That's fine. You can believe that a man is born in a woman's body and a woman is born in a man's body, and so on and so forth. And you can even believe that you live in the freest and most wonderful society that ever existed. All of these crazy myths and fantasies and delusions, you have no problem believing, and everyone accepts it if you believe that. Everyone is fine if you believe that. Even atheism, you can believe in that kind of utter nonsense. But you are programmed, you are rigidly, strictly programmed to mock and to dismiss that the devil exists and that your society worships the devil, that the Jinn are real, and that your so-called civilization has always been intertwined with the Jinn. I mean, from its very inception. This is a fact. I mean, look at that. You're absolutely obsessed with constantly shifting the blame for your evil. I've talked about that many times. You're always trying to shift the blame. You're going to say that the problem is capitalism. You're going to say the problem is the Jews. You're going to say the problem is this, the problem is that, and so on and so forth. You're always looking for a scapegoat. You're always looking for any way to avoid assigning blame to yourselves, but you don't want to do, the last thing that you want to do is assign blame to Shaitan. You absolutely reject even the concept of assigning blame to Shaitan. You'll assign blame to the universe before you'll assign blame to Shaitan. But it's obvious. It's obvious to really everyone else in the world because no one else has a problem believing in the existence of shaitan. I mean, your society is exactly what you would expect a society to look like that had been engineered and had been managed and had been developed by the devil. Honestly, there's no society in history that has been a purveyor of so much immorality, so much cruelty, so much carnage, so much rank sadism and degradation. And that's a fact. It's absolutely stunning when you look at the history. And someone has to tell you, jinn are real. And you've been messing with the jinn literally for millennia in Europe, in the West. You know, in Islam, we recognize that nations inherit and they transmit their moral character across millennia, across generations. And Europe's early formative period was a fusion of scarcity-driven ethics and jinn instruction. The later empires and philosophies and cultural norms of the West, of Europe, can all just be seen as the matured version or the matured form of that early corruption, just rationalized and technologized, but completely consistent spiritually. I mean, look, prehistorical Europe was an unforgiving, harsh landscape. You had long winters, you had limited edible fauna and flora and fauna, you had low population density. You had a very tough beginning. Europeans had a very tough beginning. I've talked about this many, many times. In this desolation and in this scarcity, that drove you towards a value system that prioritized aggression, that prioritized cunning and opportunism over, for example, cooperation and justice. And as a population whose, what you can call their survival values already leaned towards brute force and towards resource domination, violence and cruelty, your worst instincts were codified into a sort of a spiritual code. I mean, just look at all your myths, all the old European myths. The harsh environment combined with a lack of any sort of real moral restraint, that created a doctrine that you still live by until today, which is might makes right. Okay? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in the Quran that there were those from among mankind who sought refuge with the jinn. And you know from your own history, from your own legends, from your own practices, from your own folklore, that you did that. You absolutely did that from the earliest periods, all across the continent of Europe. Oh, you didn't call them jinn? Of course not. You didn't call them jinn, but that's what they were. They were jinn. You know, you called them whatever, spirits, gods, fairies, what have you. But this is jinn. This is shayateen. This is the devil. These are devils, demons. You encountered them in forests, in caves, and in the mountains, and so forth. This isn't me saying so. You understand? This is in your own history. You know this already. In the history of your own European cultures, in your customs, in your folk tales, in your folklore. It's all there. In exchange for protection, protection from predators and rival tribes and from famine and so forth, the jinn demanded your veneration and your obedience, and you gave it to them. This is according to you. So your scarcity-hardened morals got supernatural validation. Again, just look at the anthropology of Europe. I'm not making it up. I'm just explaining it to you in the context of Islamic thought, Islamic understanding. And we call it, in Islam, we call it what it is. It's devil worship. No more, no less. You had Norse and Germanic gods, so-called gods, gods of war, gods of trickery, like Loki and Odin and so forth. They were revered for their cunning and for their ability of conquest, vanquishing others, victory, brute force. And my own ancestors, the Celts, they had underworld entities that they believed in and that they gave tribute to. You had Slavic ones, you had Baltic ones, you had these Baltic and Slavic spirits that they attributed, that they say that they had control over the weather, you know, for their harvest and whatnot. And in exchange for offerings, they would, you know, think that they could get a good harvest and so forth. This is what the Quran has explained to us in terms of people bargaining with the jinn, patronage with the jinn. And this goes back as far as you can go back in Europe. I'm talking about like 30,000 BCE, okay? Archaeological evidence in Europe proves that jinn worship goes back that far. Like I said, in Paleolithic cave complexes that you found in France, in Chauvet, in what's it called, Lascaux, the Three Brothers Cave in France. You know, you had images of this antlered sorcerer type person. We understand that in Islam, we understand that this depicts people who communicate with the jinn, intermediaries with the jinn. And I mean, this abounds across Europe. Anyone who's familiar with European history knows this. You had all these types of figures in European history. You've been messing with the jinn for a very, very long time. I mean, from like 9000 BCE in England, you had, you know, shamans wearing deer skulls, literally deer skulls on their heads and performing rituals, channeling spirits and whatnot, trying to emulate predatory animals with this animal-human hybrid that is very consistent across all of the records, archaeological records, making offerings to try to guarantee, you know, successful hunts, successful crops, and so forth. That's jinn patronage. That's devil patronage. That's seeking protection of the shayateen, okay? So from 30,000 BCE to 9,000 BCE, you people were doing these things. 20,000 years, you were doing that. If you move up to the Bronze Age, then you start getting into things like Stonehenge. We're all familiar with Stonehenge. You know, you have these patterns of rocks arranged in patterns at riverbeds, at mountain passes, you know, at so-called liminal spaces, thresholds between one area and another, that they refer to as like doorways between the realms, between the human realm and the spirit realm, between the seen and the unseen. You have archaeological evidence of sacrifices, human sacrifices, offerings, transactions with the jinn. That's what that is. It's devil worship. In places like Denmark, in places like Ireland, again, my ancestors, you literally had human sacrifices. You have what they call the bog bodies. You had ritual killings. It's the sacralization of violence. Does that sound familiar? It's devil worship, and you're doing it until today. Then you got these She in Ireland, the supernatural, supposedly fairies, basically, with portals to the underworld, the other world, and so on. That's jinn. That's nothing but jinn. And people sought their protection, and they do it until now. They sought their assistance and they sought their favor. They made offerings. They made sacrifices. That's right up to the Iron Age. Then you got the Druids and whatnot, right? Again, you got the symbols of the antlered sorcerers, warrior gods, ram-headed serpents, always elevating and always emulating predators in nature, animalistic predators. You had these rituals and ceremonies and beliefs, all connecting all of these things. The consistency is absolutely startling. I mean, it's a continuity across literally tens of thousands of years. The same sorts of practices, the same sorts of imagery, the same sort of transactional relationship with the jinn for tens of thousands of years, from one corner of the continent to the other, all across Europe. In Scandinavia, like I said, you had Loki, you had Odin, and so forth. You had in all their folk tales, you'll find this. In Scandinavia, and you had this idea that knowledge and understanding can be achieved through transgression, through deceit, through predation. You had magic, you had sorcery, you had these mediators with the spirit world, intermediaries, shaman, all communicating with the jinn, seeking their favor, seeking their protection, so on and so on and so on, over and over again in European history, seeking victory from the shayateen. I mean, it literally just goes on and on. You had your seers, soothsayers, oracles, and whatnot, always demanding sacrifices, always demanding tribute, blood, mutilation, degradation. I mean, is this registering with you at all with regards to your society and the ways of your society? This is your origin story. This is your backstory. This is where you came from. I mean, do I even need to talk about the Greco-Romans? It's literally the same belief pattern from prehistory until the Romans. It's the same. Just maybe a little bit more literate veneer on the patron-client relationship with supernatural powers. It's devil worship. It's jinn worship. It's working with the jinn. And Christianity didn't rupture this pattern at all. It's fundamentally the same religion. Once Europe became Christian, so-called, you followed the same religion that you've been following for tens of thousands of years, just rebranded it. That's all. What Europe followed was not even remotely similar to the actual religion that was preached by Nabi Isa, by Jesus, the prophet Jesus, alayhi salam, peace be upon him. Not even remotely similar to what he taught. Like I've said before, Rome did not actually become Christian. Christians became Romans. That's what actually happened. You just adapted, you know. You adapted everything that you had always believed and everything that you had always practiced in your pagan religion in Europe, and you just put the costume of monotheism on it. That's the only difference, you know. Catholics until today enact the drinking of blood and the eating of flesh every Sunday at Mass. You got other Christian denominations where they speak in tongues. Jinn possession, rebranded as the Holy Spirit. You've got idols, you've got superstitions, you've got jinn possession. Nothing changed. Nothing changed. You've got your amulets, you've got your charms, you've got your intercessors. You still have your magicians, you still have your witches, you still have your sorcerers casting spells. But instead of calling them spells, you just call them prayers. Prayers to the Father, to the Son, to the Holy Ghost, to Mary, to the saints, to the angels, to whoever, to even to your pastor, I don't know, to your ancestors, to your loved ones who are long past and so forth. And then, of course, you had the kingship, rulership, and so forth, always was connected to their access to supernatural entities. Even your so-called enlightenment didn't change anything. That's a fact. It didn't change anything. It's just another rebranding. The same way that Christianity was a rebranding of paganism, secularism was also just another rebrand. You know, instead of calling upon, you know, whatever, Odin or Loki or Saint Christopher or the Holy Ghost, people just turned to new labels like the universe. You hear that now. Energies, vibrations, archetypes, the unconscious, evolutionary psychology. Again, think about that. Evolutionary psychology, again, is with that human animal hybrid fixation. And the exchange is always the same, seeking advantage in the world from the unseen in return for belief, ritual, and obedience, subservience, subordination. And obviously in the West, occultism never disappeared either. Like I said, even amidst your modern scientific society, now you just scientize everything, you know, vibrations, low and high vibrations, frequencies, and so on. It's the same as it ever was. You're the same as you ever were. Now, again, I don't care if you understand or if you believe or if you accept the reality of the existence of the jinn or the existence of shaitan. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you believe now. Your people believed it for the entirety of your history up until just yesterday, you know? And like I said, it's basically just semantics, whether you believe in it or not. It's just semantics. Because you do believe, you just use different terminology. You just use different rationales. You just use different definitions, different explanations, and so on. But the point is, you can deny whatever you like. But you cannot deny the reality of your history. The reality of your history going all the way back to the Ice Age. You people believed in otherworldly beings, and your people worshiped them. They sought their help, they sought their instruction, they sought their protection, and the intermediaries who claimed to be able to communicate with them, these otherworldly beings, these jinn, they led you, they guided you, they molded you, they ruled you, they shaped your whole culture, and you grew from those roots. They sought their help, they sought their protection, they sought material gain, and they sought success, they sought victory through them, through the jinn. They sought their favor, and they feared their wrath. And favor and wrath were always measured or always interpreted in terms of worldly acquisition, worldly favor. You know, if they favored you, then your crops would grow. You would have babies. Your enemies would be vanquished. You would have bounty and abundance, and so on in this life. If the jinn were angry with you, then your crops died. Your enemies defeated you. You were defeated by your enemies. You had poverty, you had famine, you didn't have children, what have you. Your relationship was transactional always, and always based on fear and based on self-interest. Fear in terms of fear of weakness, fear of insufficiency, fear of inadequacy, and self-interest was always also dunya related, material self-interest. This is your moral code, the moral code of your so-called civilization. It was developed and reinforced across a vast expanse of time. And from the Islamic perspective, yes, obviously, we understand that those otherworldly beings were shayateen. That was devil worship that you were engaged in, that your so-called civilization was engaged in. And your deplorably primitive moral code is further evidence of that fact. These beings, that your sorcerers, your shaman, your priests, and so forth, these beings that they interacted with did not guide you to high, refined moral values, moral principles. It was always animalistic and predatory throughout. That's what they taught you. And you were never elevated by your worship. You were degraded by your worship. And that's what always happens. Yes, you should listen to the Muslims. You should listen to the Muslims about this, because we know all about shaitan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his messenger told us all about shaitan, told us everything you need to know about the devil. We know it. We know exactly how this plays out when you mess with the jinn. We know exactly how that plays out. So you can get what you value from the jinn, but you'll never get what's truly valuable. Do you understand? Because the jinn will teach you, just like they taught the Europeans, to only value what the jinn can give you and to devalue what the jinn cannot give you. And throughout this whole process of interacting with the jinn, you will give them what they value, which is your humiliation and your corruption and your degradation. Or you've been in a Faustian deal for millennia as a so-called civilization in the West, in Europe. And your development as a people, as a so-called civilization, has been frozen since the Paleolithic age. You've been intertwined with the jinn for at least 3 to 4 decamillennia, 30 to 40,000 years. Do you understand me? That's the backstory of your culture. You're entrenched in this. These are the foundations. These are the roots of your so-called civilization. It's the roots, it's the trunk, and it's the branches of your so-called civilization. It has shaped everything about you. It has shaped everything about the West, about your paradigms, your perspectives, how you interact with the world, how you interpret reality, your relationship with morality, your relationship with ethics and principles and ideals and so forth. Even when you think you've broken free, when you pat yourself on the back for being so modern, for being so rational, for being so enlightened, the truth is you haven't escaped anything. You've just changed the packaging on what you've always had. You just changed the names. You just changed the rituals. You changed the architecture. You changed the locale of your worship and the manner of your worship. But the relationship is exactly the same. The same bowing to unseen masters. The same bargaining for worldly advantage, the same fear of losing their favor, the same fear of them. You went from spirits in the trees and the caves to saints in the cathedrals, and from saints in the cathedrals to, the universe, forces of nature, what have you. And now you moved on to whatever, algorithms, artificial intelligence, worshiping in corporate temples. It's still the same bargain. It's a transactional submission to something that you believe can give you control over the world, without ever requiring you to control yourself. And you call it progress. But it's the same Paleolithic superstition, just dressed up with a new vocabulary. Once it was, if we offer the right sacrifice, then the rains will come. Then it was, if we recite the right, aria or what have you, then the saint will intercede on our behalf. Now it's, if we fund the right research, then the technology will save us. Different language, same primitive moral calculus. And you've refused the only arrangement that would actually break that cycle, which is servitude to the creator of the unseen, not to the unseen. Not servitude to the unseen itself, but to the creator of the unseen. Because everything else that you've worshipped has only made you more like itself. Predatory, arrogant, and hollow. That's why your whole history from the Ice Age until today is actually, in reality, just one unbroken continuum of fear and greed, dressed up alternatively as religion or as politics or now as science. Every so-called golden age that you ever had was built on conquest, was built on violence, was built on exploitation and moral rot. You can change your gods 1,000 times, but you will never change your nature, because the transaction has never changed. The root has never changed. You never cut yourself off from those roots, and you still seek the same things. You still pay the same price. and you're just as morally primitive today as you were 40,000 years ago. I mean, think about your horror movies. Think about your horror movies. Do you know that most people in the world, most people in the global south, in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, and so forth, they find it very bizarre and they find it very disturbing how much you love those movies, those horror movies. They think it's bizarre and disturbing that it's even a genre at all, much less that it's one of the most popular genres in Western cinema. But I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why you love those movies so much. It's not random. It's not random that you came up with that, because it's not just entertainment for you. Horror movies are a ceremonial reenactment of your oldest religious instincts. You know, you're simultaneously terrified and in awe of evil, the power of evil, or what you perceive to be the power of evil. And this perception of the power of evil that you have in the West, this goes back for tens of thousands of years with you. This is the oldest liturgy of the West, that is to be terrified of and yet to venerate that which terrifies you. You understand? To be terrified and to venerate that which terrifies you. To be horrified of the darkness, but to also seek the power of the darkness. You don't watch those movies to see the evil spirit, to see the demon, or to see the ghost, or what have you, to see that, Jason, or the, supernatural, basically immortal killer. You don't watch those movies to see the evil person or the evil entity get defeated. You watch those movies to see the carnage get unleashed. You watch those movies to see the sadism, to watch the glorification of evil. You watch those movies to feel the awe at the power of the devil. This is a religious experience for you when you watch a horror film. Because again, this goes all the way back to the very beginning of your so-called civilization. This is a very old impulse that you have. It's very deep in you. It evokes a deep, resonating feeling inside of you in the West, Westerners. It's the same way that, in other cultures, they might respond to a film that's about their heroic ancestors or about religious figures. It conjures up very deep, like I say, and deeply resonant emotions for Westerners. Very deep, resonant emotions, feelings of awe, feelings of terror, and frankly, feelings of adoration. This genre is itself a ceremony. It's a ritual that invokes your ancestral spiritual roots. Think about it. I mean, how many horror films start off in some isolated cabin in the woods? Well, that's your history. An isolated cabin in the woods. And then the whole movie, in and of itself, the whole movie is just a parable about what happens when you anger the Jinn, which is just another way of saying you shouldn't anger the Jinn. You want to see what happens when someone does anger the Jinn. You see that they're powerful, and you should respect them, and you should fear them, and you shouldn't mess with them, and so on. I mean, even in most of these films, think about it, in most of these films, especially the ones that are about demons, that are about possession and so forth, ghosts and whatnot, in most of these movies, the evil entity, the evil being, is never actually vanquished. It's either satisfied in one way or another, or it moves on to another target, or the protagonist himself or herself becomes the new vessel for that evil entity. You very rarely ever see the Jinn defeated in these movies, because in fact, they are the heroes of the story. The whole story actually only exists to solidify your justification for fearing and venerating them for all these millennia, because that's the basis of your whole so-called civilization, like I said. And in fact, this same impulse is the only reason why your current iteration as a society, as a culture, this is the reason why you so vehemently reject even admitting the existence of the Jinn, the existence of Shaitan. Even though your own continuous belief in the devil and your continuous subordination to the devil is actually uninterrupted and is manifest in every way all the time until today, but you deny it. And this is actually a form in and of itself. This is a form of fear and veneration, the name that shall not be spoken. Because look, as I said, as Muslims, we understand this very completely. We understand this fully. We have very detailed information. We have very detailed knowledge about the Jinn. And we are not in awe of the Jinn. And we do not perceive them as powerful. dangerous, but not powerful. No, they're dangerous, but not powerful. We are aware that they exist, and we know what they do, and we know what they can do, and we know why they do it, and we know what their tactics are, and so forth. And we know what happens when you get involved with the jinn. But to us, the jinn are just like any other dangerous creatures in this world, any other dangerous creature or predator on earth. They're the same as any dangerous or wicked people, and we avoid them, and we protect ourselves from them. You know, we protect ourselves from them, whereas what you did was to seek protection with them. We seek protection against them. You sought protection from them, with them. And that's because you were scared of them. You were scared of them because you perceived them to be so powerful. You perceived them to be supernaturally powerful. And then once you sought protection from them, or sought protection with them, then that just amplified and exaggerated to you their power. And of course, they encouraged you to do that. And then you got even more scared. You know, then you got even more in awe of what you thought to be their power. So it's a cycle that you created for yourself. But we're healthy. We have a healthy, balanced view about the jinn. We know what they can and cannot do, and we know how to deal with them. Now, again, like I said, I don't care if you consciously believe or disbelieve in any of this. It doesn't matter to me. I mean, it would be better for you if you at least acknowledge it. But either way, it doesn't matter, because the irreducible reality is that you exist in a culture that has always been completely and inextricably connected to the jinn, to the shayateen. Belief in them, worship of them, client-patron relationships. That's your history. And it's not wise for you to ignore the impact that this history has had on your development as a so-called civilization. Obviously, it has affected you. And again, it doesn't matter if you believe that your ancestors were or were not genuinely in contact with these beings, or if they were just faking it. You know, if they were faking it for 30,000, 40,000 years. It's fine. You can believe that the hunter-gatherers of the Paleolithic age were cunning enough and savvy enough and manipulative enough to invent these things, to invent these interactions, to invent the spirit entities. That's up to you. You can believe that. We know otherwise. And really, so do you. You really do know otherwise as well, but you can stick to whatever story makes you comfortable. It doesn't matter. Like I said, whether it was real or whether it was fake, your people did with it what they did. And it made your so-called civilization what it is today. It made your worldview what it is today. It made your moral code what it is today. And it made your character what it is today. It made your behavior and it made your actions what they are today. And what they have been for as long as anyone can remember. And it's made the systems that you created the way they are. And objectively, this worldview, this moral code, and these behaviors, and these actions, and your systems, objectively are utterly horrendous. They've been a scourge on humanity. They've been a scourge and a plague on humanity for centuries, and that is not even open to debate. But you're never going to be able to understand any of this. You're never going to be able to understand any of this about yourself, about your so-called civilization, about your societies, unless and until you confront and understand the history that you grew from, the root that you grew from. Because you grew from it, but you didn't grow out of it. You understand? You didn't outgrow it. It permeates everything about your societies right now in 2025. And that's what makes your society so peculiar. That's what makes your society so strange and so inhuman in so many ways. Now listen, I'm not saying all of this as an indictment. Understand me. I'm not saying this as an indictment. I'm saying it as a diagnosis. Because at the end of the day, you are my brothers and sisters in humanity. Like I said, you have been lied to, and you have lied to yourselves, and you have believed the lies you've been told and the lies that you told yourself. And that has been catastrophic for you, and it has been catastrophic for the rest of us. And you keep looking around within your society for solutions. You keep looking around within your society for remedies. And everything that you find is actually nothing but deflections and misdirections and diversions and placebos. In your current state, your society, your so-called civilization, is frankly incapable of being honest. It's incapable of being moral. It's incapable of being just. It's incapable of being decent. Your so-called civilization is incapable of being civilized. The truth of the matter is that you cannot be trusted, you cannot be relied upon, you cannot be responsible or fair or believed. That's just the way it is. And that's because of your whole history. It's because of the fact that your whole history and your whole development, or lack thereof, because of that, morality is nothing but a game of wordplay for you. You know, if you make a wrong move, you just lose some leverage. You lose social capital. You lose credibility. And you lose that not because you said or did something that was immoral. I mean, it's not due to the immorality itself, but you lose points because you just lapsed in the maintenance of your appearance of official accepted morality. You understand? Morality for you is just a game of one-upsmanship. It's a point-scoring game. It's a rap battle. Okay, this is the approach of someone, or the approach of a people who do not have an internalized moral system. But you see, like I've talked about before, I've talked about this a few times. You have layers. You have in the West, you have the actual operative code, and then you have the interface. And the interface is beautiful. Oh, the interface is beautiful. It's lovely. But the operative code is barbaric. So you have people, you have millions of people in the West. I believe this. You have millions of people in the West who've been raised on the interface, okay, who believe the interface. I'm talking about the moral rhetoric, you know. It's like someone who's not a tech person, someone who's not familiar with computers and so forth. So they think that their computer actually operates by the icons on their screen and by clicking and so forth, because they have no idea about the actual code behind any of that. They don't know how the computer actually functions, how it actually works. So you have people who believe that the West actually is the rhetoric that you find in the interface. See, they have no idea about the actual operative code of that so-called civilization, of the so-called civilization that they're living in. They don't understand that. And so they experience severe cognitive dissonance, like I said. This is why if you're someone in the West who genuinely wants to be moral, you constantly feel like you're going crazy in that society. You feel like you're living in a madhouse in that society. Because you think that morality is supposed to be connected to actions, not just appearances. You think that it's not just supposed to be a point-scoring game for social capital and social leverage. But that's not how your society works, you know? So you'll keep clicking on the icon, but the program won't open because the code is missing. You can right-click, you can left-click, you can double-click, you can try everything, but that program is not going to open because the files are not there. You know, it's like back in the day when we would install a pirated version of Microsoft. It's the same. You have a counterfeit morality in the West. The code isn't there. The files are missing. It's not going to work. You know, on your screen, it looks great, but none of it actually functions. So you're frustrated and you're confused and you don't understand why this is. You know, you'll tell yourself that your system has a virus, you know, like a corrupted file or something. That's what it means when people say, like, for example, the problem is capitalism. The problem is this or that system within the Western so-called civilization. Or the problem is this or that politician or what have you, or this or that social movement. No, the foundational coding is wrong. And it's been wrong the whole time. Okay, the interface is moral looking, but the operative system is moral inversion. You've been a predatory, materialistic, nihilistic, exploitative, morally bankrupt so-called civilization from the very inception. Morality and principles and ethics in the West are just a superficial interface for you. So if you are someone who genuinely wants morality and principles and ethics to actually go deeper than that, then you're going to have to stop looking for that where you are. Because it's not going to happen. It doesn't exist where you are. What we know as the West, you know, Europe and so forth, it has been demonic. Okay? It's been demonic since before the woolly mammoth went extinct. Europeans were involved with and interacting with and seeking the protection of the Jinn when the Sahara Desert was still a grassland. You understand? And they never stopped from then until today. And once you understand this, you can't not see it all around you. You know, you think that things have been going downhill, but they haven't. They've been exactly the same as they've ever been. Understand, Shaitan flows through the veins of Western so-called civilization. And if you're trying to be a good person, and I know you'll understand this because I know that you've experienced this. If you're trying to be a good person, a moral person, a decent person, then you're treated like a cancer in that society because you are like a cancer in that society. They'll treat you like you're the one who's sick. They'll treat you like you're the infection. They'll make you think that you're crazy. They'll make you think that there's something wrong with you because they normalize what's abnormal and they make the unnatural natural. And I'm telling you, if you object to this, if you reject this, then you are, in fact, the one who is out of step with your society. You are, in fact, the one who is sick according to the society's definition of healthy, the society that you're in. And they're not going to change their definitions. I'm telling you, they're not going to change their definitions. So you're the one who's got it wrong. You're the one who's got it wrong because you're expecting for your society to be other than what it always has been. And that's not going to happen. It's not going to change. So I'm telling non-Muslim Westerners, and I'm talking to you truly with compassion, because you are, as I say, my brothers and sisters in humanity, and you have been deceived. You have been misled. You have been fooled, cruelly fooled. And the cruelest thing about this, the cruelest thing about how you have been lied to is that when you actually believe the lies, they punish you for believing the lies. They'll punish you for your naivete. You understand? They punish you for believing them when they said that they were moral, because you're supposed to know that it was all a con. You're supposed to know that this was all just a game. You know, it's just like if you have an upright cop who works in a corrupt police force, well, he'll get punished by his fellow officers because he's gullible enough to actually believe in the law. He's gullible enough to actually believe in justice and serving and protecting the community, when actually everyone who works with him, all of his colleagues, all of his fellow police officers, is just out to get their cut of seized drug money. They're all out there just to extort and to shake down the neighborhood. So he'll be punished for believing in what's moral and what's right. But I'm also saying this, and I'm mostly saying this, of course, for my brothers and sisters in Islam, because this is extremely important. You have to understand this about the West, about the origins of the West. And don't ever let yourself think for a moment that they mean anything that they say about morals, about principles, about ethics, and so forth, or about the law. No, don't ever let yourself trust them, and don't ever let yourself believe them. Don't ever let yourself rely on them or count on them in any way whatsoever. They won't do anything for you when they pretend that they're in solidarity with you, say over Palestine, or whether it's over Palestine or Sudan or anything else. If they pretend that they're in solidarity with you, believe me, they won't do anything for you, except that whatever they did for you, they will try to leverage that to try to get a compromise out of you. They'll try to compromise you. They'll try to corrupt you. They'll try to misguide you. They'll try to lead you astray. And in fact, that's the only reason that they ever tried to get close to you in the first place. And they do that because they can't help it, because it's ingrained in their cultural DNA over the course of millennia of tutelage and patronage under Shaitan. So you have to deal with them very cautiously. And you have to deal with them always being very consciously aware of this fact. I mean, I pray that they will be guided, but unless and until they are guided, they are not. And the friendliest ones are the most dangerous ones, whether they're from the so-called right or the so-called left. This is just like the difference between iOS versus Android, right and left. They all come from that same so-called civilization, and they all have those same civilizational instincts. So understand who you're dealing with, and don't ever let your guard down. And act like you know that we are in a conflict with Shaitan and his minions. And don't ever show despair in public. Don't ever show weakness in public. Don't ever show pessimism in public. Don't ever be divisive against the Muslims. Don't ever help Shaitan against our own people. And don't ever utter a word in public that will or that even might give comfort to our enemies.